to withdraw its troops. But Washington did neither of those things. Today, more than 37 years later, the Turkish army continues to occupy the northern one-third of Cyprus in violation of international law, and Turkey has illegally settled occupied Cyprus with more than 180,000 Turks from Anatolia. Why did the United States fail to act? The answer, according to the documentary we are about to view, lies in a tangled web of domestic politics, the realpolitik of Henry Kissinger, and repeated refusal of successful U.S. presidents to demand that the rule of law and fundamental human rights be upheld in Cyprus. Reviewing the U.S. failure to play that role over the past 3.5 decades, the documentary includes interviews with a host of lawmakers, policymakers, and Cyprus experts. It also includes a recently declassified information of a 1974 State Department memo in which then Secretary of State Kissinger states, and I quote, "There is no American reason why the Turks should not have 1/3 of Cyprus," end quote. And on that rather somber, yet very eye-opening and realistic note, the American Hellenic Institute Foundation presents the documentary, Cyprus Still Divided, a U.S. Foreign Policy Failure. Thank you very much.
In fact, the dimension of the issue, and that is the drilling in the Cypriot exclusive economic zone that has the exploratory drilling that has been conducted, and the reaction of the Republic of Turkey to basically and illegally again oppose the drilling there. This will change. It'll be a long time, but this will change the economic future of Cyprus, but it also affects the present dimensions of the Cyprus issue, because both the United States and the European Union have come out very, very strongly and expressly that Turkey's actions and attitude towards the drilling is illegal and improper. Let's go on with the, any questions, any discussion points?
And we can open up to any questions. The American Hellenic Institute is a public policy organization that deals with all the issues regarding U.S.-Greek Cyprus relations. So feel free to ask, on any question you might have as well, since this opportunity doesn't present itself very often.
I'd like to note also while we're doing this, something that was mentioned by one of the speakers earlier, and that is education. Bear in mind that AHI, having been in Washington since for 37 years, well, every Congress you have a turnover of congressmen, senators. We just had one in November. Many of these congressmen, if not all of them, and senators come in knowing nothing about this issue at all. My first job in Washington was working for AHI as a very young attorney eons ago. The legislative liaison for AHI at that time had set up a meeting with a congressman, I believe he was from Iowa. I went up to see him. The congressman, to get in, he's sitting behind his desk, he sees me, pops up, says, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here, we have to address this issue, this is so important, I am personally committed to it." And I'm sitting there thinking, boy, what a great lobbyist I am. I didn't even say anything, and look how enthusiastic he is. And he carries on, and then says, "And we have to do something to protect these trees." And I said, "Trees?" "Yeah, the cypress trees." And I said, no, I'm up here to discuss the island of Cyprus and the Turkish invasion. And he looked at me like I was from Mars. Well, in any event, we need to do this every 2 years. The education on this issue has to be done every 2 years. Part of the impetus for the documentary was to say, look, if people aren't going to pick up an article, a book about Cyprus, they may watch TV for 56 minutes on Cyprus. And that's really what this documentary is aimed for. Many people in this room and around the country who have seen it are very steeped in the issue, know it very well. Most people do not. So hopefully this documentary, and if we are able to do further updates, will at least serve that purpose, starting point.
More to the contemporary point as well. Nick just told you about the experience he had on Capitol Hill. Well, we also, of course, have been outreach into the State Department. They too change in their respective positions. And it's another area that you continuously have to reach out and to educate. And to that point, just last week, Nick, myself, and another staff person of the AHI went and visited with the new leadership, if you will, of Southeastern Europe. And again, you just were able to gauge from the discussion in the room that there was just a lack of knowledge regarding not just obviously the Cyprus issue, but all the issues regarding Southeastern Europe. So it's a constant educational terrain that you have to undergo. Obviously, it's important for us as Greek Americans to be aware of this because we have a vested interest. But so reaching out to members of Congress and to policymakers is just extremely important because they literally deal with thousands of issues on a daily basis, and you're constantly fighting to try to bring your issue to the forefront and to the top. And that happens in many ways. It happens in the way that it took place last night here in New Jersey. Fundraising is a big part of it. It's just the way the game is played. But more so than that, on our issues, and let me make the point on our issues. I was recently told by a very important chief of staff and a very important member of Congress. He said, Nick, the Turks are getting savvy. I knew what he meant by that. Okay, and if you don't know about it, you should be aware of it. The Turkish community is growing, and they're becoming more politically active, and that means they're also reaching out to grassroots level, educating their base, and in turn, raising money for politicians. And that's what he means by ultimately savvy. But I turned to this man and I said, you know what? I hear what you're saying, and I acknowledge it. But at the end of the day, I challenge, no matter how much money they put up, the Turks that is, no matter how savvy they may be, to be able to defend their position against the morality of this issue. And I think still that would be a very difficult thing to do at the end of the day. But those are not the way we are able to go and to pursue these issues. We have to pursue these issues with what we have in hand to work with. And that is what this documentary was highlighting. We deal with the law. And this is the only armaments that we have. These are our bullets of constantly reminding our policymakers, our lawmakers, of where there's been violation and a failure of U.S. law regarding issues in the Southeastern Europe. And it was specifically because of that that we were able to impose the embargo on Turkey in 1974, and for no other reason. Because there was a law that was violated called the Foreign Assistance Act that was amended of '64 because of offensive use of American-made weapons by Turkey, and that was basically the impetus to be able to use as the argument to ultimately put on Turkey, to put an embargo against Turkey.
There's a saying that 40,000 lawyers cannot defeat 40,000 Turkish troops. We're out to prove that wrong.
Thank you for doing this. I may have missed this in the film. It's those invasions in 1974 were so overwhelming. Why didn't they take the rest of the island, the Turks? Why didn't they?
But at the same time, though, the defense contractors, that military-industrial complex, okay, is a very important lobbyist for Turkey, and they do a very good...
Yes. Okay, go ahead, please.
Yes. Nick, first of all, this is Stelios Tsinodidis from the Cyprus Society of Greater Philadelphia. I and a couple of our members are here. First of all, we want to extend a warm congratulations to all of you for organizing this event. Certainly the film captures the essence of the issue. You guys have done an outstanding job. I would like to make one comment and then a question. Would you follow us along the lines that Gus asked? Prior to our Senator Menendez, and we all love the man and we know how fervent supporter he is for Cyprus, and we do want him to be re-elected as well. Prior to him being our primary sponsor, the man who was prior to him was Senator Biden, the current Vice President of the United States. And I remember in 2008, prior to the elections, We had a SEGA conference down in Washington, D.C., where we honored him. And he gave a very passionate speech about Cyprus. And my question now comes to Senator Biden is currently the Vice President of the United States, who was the biggest Cyprus supporter. How is he working today to help our issue? And how are we reaching out to him to make that happen? Maybe some comments from you. Thank you.
Valid question. Let me try to give you a very succinct answer. Senator Biden was certainly instrumental in the early days, thanks to the Delaware community, led by Mr. Yu and others, and Dean Lomas at the time, where they went and, as Dean Lomas likes to say, when he went in Senator Biden's office back in the early days of '74 after the invasion, and where Senator Biden kept on butting him and trying to interrupt him, and Dean Lomas finally said, and I quote, because I've heard Dean say this story many times, "Senator, will you just shut up and let me finish?" And then he quickly apologized. And he said, "If I provide you with information on what we're talking about here today, will you finally listen to us?" So that's what happened, and they provided the information, and then from there, we know what happened. He was one of our biggest proponents in the Senate, in Congress in general, and has been for all of these years. Where has that led us now 37 years later? And it's a valid point, and today that Senator Biden is the Vice President of the United States. But before that, he was also the senator who was the chairman of the all-powerful Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And frankly, I just didn't see that much moving forward when he was there. So if he didn't do it there, or he had more of an independent approach to be able to do it, now as Vice President, it's a little more difficult for him, to do certain things. I am personally disappointed, to be very blunt, in Senator Biden, current Vice President Biden, regarding this issue. He certainly has said all the right things, rhetorically, as this administration has. When you go back and you look at this administration's campaign statements of 3 years ago now, they were right on top of what we want them to say. All the right things. But many individuals who on the campaign trail over the years have said the right thing. Bill Clinton said some of the best things. It was like we wrote it ourselves, frankly, if you look at his pre-campaign statements. And yet, once they get into office, for whatever reason, and we mentioned some of them, the proof is in the pudding, and they just refuse to put and ratchet up the pressure on Turkey. Now, that is certainly one of the problems. But we all need to look at ourselves in the mirror, because it's all part of our problem too. Because the way this system works here is all politics is local. And you have to work the grassroots community. So before we start accusing others who are in a decision-making process, we need to look in the mirror and ask, what are we doing on a daily basis? To bring these things to their attention and to push things forward. I guarantee you there's probably, aside from the individuals that I know because they're actively involved, I bet you if you took a poll in here, only a few hands would go up. When was the last time anyone here contacted Chris Smith or Russ Holt or whoever the other local congressman, or the new guy, the former Philadelphia Eagle, I should remember this, and I can't remember his name now, who has contacted him and asked him and educate him on our issues? Well, it also involves getting those kind of letters and messages into the White House, too, and the State Department. When we put out action alerts from the American Hellenic Institute on certain things, I venture to say very few people react to them. And that segues into what I was going to talk about earlier. We have a piece of legislation here, H.R. 2597. It's a bill regarding American property, Americans who have lost their property in occupied Cyprus. It's a long bill. It's a complicated bill. You don't even need to know all the details of the bill. All you need to be able to do is call up Chris Smith tomorrow, who's not on this bill as a co-sponsor, and ask him, Chris, it's come to my understanding that there's this bill H2597 on Capitol Hill in the Congress, and I would like you to support it. And if you don't, I'd like to know why. And as a matter of fact, from the whole state of New Jersey, Frank Pallone, the longtime supporter, and somebody that I know that Sava Civico has worked very closely with over the years to bring him up to speed, as the other members, obviously, of the Cypriot American community have in New Jersey. He initiated it, and there's only one other co-sponsor on this legislation, and that's Steve Rothman from New Jersey. So there's your immediate task. Don't look at the big picture. You got to look at the small picture. The big picture will take care of itself if you, at the grassroots level, take care of the small picture of what you're able to influence. As I said, and Tip O'Neill used time and time again, the former great Speaker of the House of Representatives, all politics is local. That's why they spend 3 days out of the week mostly back in their home districts. Because that's where their bread is buttered. And we need to do a better job at it. So how many of you on Monday morning are going to pick up the phone of whoever represents you in New Jersey, and you're going to ask them to co-sponsor HR 2597? It's really that simple, folks.
It's truth that we have to face as a community. What are we doing about our own issue? It's 37 years. Even some of our young people haven't got a clue. What happened in 1974 in Cyprus and what's happening in Greece, and the dangers that are brewing up now in the Eastern Mediterranean, with Turkey becoming more assertive and more aggressive about gas and oil exploration, in full exercise of our normal and legitimate rights. So this is what we have to do: re-educate ourselves and get going. Some other people have. Manos, please. Manos, welcome. You were not here when we were welcoming you and giving you the floor.
Thank you, and bravo to Ahi, that for so many years you have been true to your cause, and you are one of the very few voices in Greek America. Having been involved with this issue since day one, I would like to, and looking at the film, it brings back memories, and if I may, I would like to make a couple of comments. And I'm going back to 1974, when there was, the Greek American lobby was not existing. There was nothing. And in 1974, the only thing we could do is just run out in the streets of New York and just express our outcry. And on TV, I would not forget, I don't know if you were around at the time, Tim Brokaw, is that his name? Tom Brokaw. He was saying, get those Greeks out of the streets. That's what he was saying. He was humiliating. And we would call the station and they wouldn't even talk to us. And that was the beginning of the Greek American lobby, because there was nothing at the time. That's number one. Number two, about Senator Biden, the previous speaker spoke about him. I will remember vividly, and I'm sure Savas remembers that as well. It was about at least 10 years ago, and we had gathered in his office in one of the second conferences, and I remember his words. He said, I know we've been here year after year, and we haven't accomplished much. But one of the things that we have accomplished is to keep this issue alive. And that's what Nick is trying to tell us right now. To keep the issue alive is extremely important. And that was before Cyprus was admitted into the European Union. And last but not least, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we play a very important role. When we say we here, the Greek American community of New Jersey, because I believe this is the strongest Greek American lobby that exists. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nick. And that's why we have to assume the responsibility and help those people to continue, because if we don't, guess what? We're going to lose. Especially now, with the sad state of Greece, the responsibility falls on us even more. So it's something that we have to take seriously, and again, well done, and we're with you. Well done. Thank you.
I'm not Greek, but I've learned, I don't think this is on. I'm not Greek, but I've learned a lot about Cyprus in the last few years by Alkis Konstantinidis. And I have a couple of things to say. First, I knew a lot more about Turkey than I knew about Cyprus before I met Alkis. Second, recently I saw on Charlie Rose an interview between Charlie and the ambassador from Turkey, I think the ambassador to the UN. He was charming and fluent and was characterizing Turkey as this peace-loving, diplomatic, kind of like the Switzerland of the Middle East, trying to be a go-between of these different countries on behalf of the West and the East, of the Islam and the Christians. And I was astounded that Charlie Rose said nothing about, what about your position in northern Cyprus? So first of all, the fact that Charlie Rose apparently doesn't know about that, I think is pretty appalling. Secondly, why isn't Cyprus taking a strategic initiative apart from the moral high ground and doing Turkey one better and becoming a diplomatic portfolio carrier, becoming a voice on the international stage, using articulate skills, verbal, I mean, there's so much Greek intelligence in terms of politics and policy. Isn't that a role that Cyprus could play, which would not require enormous wealth, but could become a go-between or more of a player on the international stage and not let Turkey become the only voice in that region?
Well, let me address the first part of that, the interview with Charlie Rose. I saw that as well. Turkey, while I don't know whether what I'm about to say happened with Charlie Rose, we do know that oftentimes when high-level Turkish officials are interviewed by the American media or interviewers, they're told in advance, Cyprus is something you better not ask us about or we're not going to appear. So that happens. Whether it happened on this particular show, I do not know, but I know it happens.
That's a newsworthy thing for investigative journalism.
Well, we got journalists.
Yeah.
Well, let me just say this also. I mean, well, maybe he could have asked them, why are you flying over Greek territorial airspace on a daily basis? Why are you trying to suffocate a holy see called the Ecumenical Patriarchate that have 300 million Orthodox Christians around the world? Charlie Rose did have the Ecumenical Patriarch on as a guest earlier in the year as well. He could have built on that, but he chose not to for whatever reason. It could be because of what Nick is talking about. But fundamental, and again, we're not here to second guess or even, say why a Greek government or Cyprus government does what it does or doesn't do. That's for them. We speak as Americans. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the message we're trying to put forth is to American policymakers, because that is the only influence that we have. We are all Americans in this room. We can't influence the Greek government, the Cyprus government, or the Turkish government. The only ones we can possibly influence is our own government, as mandated by the Constitution of the United States, that allows each one of us as citizens, to be able to do that. Having said that, it becomes important to know, though, what Greece and Cyprus is doing for U.S. strategic interests in the southeastern Mediterranean. And certainly, an overwhelming practically no one on Capitol Hill, except for a handful of people, are aware of what Greece and Cyprus has been doing, and is doing. But I would venture to say that Greek Americans, unfortunately, are not aware in terms of what Greece and Cyprus is doing. You can't believe how many times I speak to audiences across the country where they come up and rise and say, but look what Greece is doing, and Turkey has this army, they're doing all these great things for the United States, and they just don't know what they're talking about. And we could go on here and come up with all sorts of examples. And this nonsense about Turkey being a faithful U.S. ally, okay, and we need to support them, okay, blindly, is just absurd policy, and we better wake up and smell the roses. Because no matter how big of a landmass they have, no matter how many military they have, and they do have the second largest naval army, and no matter how strength they are in terms of their military numbers, and how secular they may perceive to be in a Muslim country, at the end of the day, someone is faithful, okay, and an ally, if they allow themselves to be used in that capacity. And Turkey, the record is more than clear. Going back the last 50 years, Turkey has never sided on the side of the West, showing that with U.S. interest, and it's proven time and time again. And the most recent one is the one I alluded to earlier, when in the second Iraqi war, when we needed to open up a northern front in Iraq, and our fleet is making circles on the Aegean Sea off the western coast of Turkey, while they're deciding what they're going to do. And then they want $26 billion to allow us the use of their soil to open up a northern front. And then when we agreed to this, ridiculous amount of money, then they ante it up to $32 billion. And that's when we said, forget it. And you had in the Bush administration at the time, a high-level Bush administration official say, extortion in the name of alliance. Well, okay, but business as usual with Turkey. When have you heard a president come out and make any speech regarding, in a strong way, regarding the occupation force? When visited with the ecumenical patriarch at the patriarchate, the patriarch came to him in his hotel. I just think that's not right at the end of the day. It's like going to the Vatican, okay, to meet with the Pope, and instead of going to the Vatican, okay, the President of the United States asked this Orthodox Christian leader of 300 million Orthodox Christians, you need to come and visit me in my hotel room. Now, granted, he came here, and they accorded him all sorts of, courtesies and honors, in Washington, and that's all good and fine. But today, that Holy See that represents 300 million Orthodox Christians, including 5 million Americans living in this country, is still under siege. It still cannot practice religious freedom. His title is not recognized as ecumenical. And what do? We don't invoke our own laws on this, which no one here is going to know what I'm going to say when I'm going to say it. There's something called the International Religious Freedom Act, okay, that was passed unanimously in the U.S. Congress in 1998. That's used by our government, our president, against violators of religious freedom, and it has 1 through 15 enumerated sanctions from less severe to more severe that we can impose on Turkey. Do we ever use it? No, we don't. We at the American Land Institute keep reminding our government that this exists, but they don't. Cyprus, when President Papadopoulos was convalescent at the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, from his cancer treatments, and we needed, during the second Iraqi war, overflights of Cyprus to go to the Middle East, he authorized those flights from his hospital bed in Jacksonville, Florida. No one here in this room, except for a handful, probably were even aware of this. Right now, in Limassol Harbor, American ships pay routine visits, military vessels. And that whole facility is being upgraded regarding what Turkey is contributing, what Cyprus is contributing. And of course, the use of the 2 sovereign military bases, the British bases on Cyprus, which are used for listening posts and Warsaw during the Cold War. There's a lot of things that Greece and Cyprus have been doing, and don't let me get started on Suda Bay, Crete, and what's going on there. And that, by far, is the most important facility for U.S. strategic interest anywhere in the Mediterranean. And it's not Nick Larigakis saying that. That's the people I visited with in Suda Bay who are saying that. And they were American.
Okay.